So if you've got the handout we've been using the last few weeks, which is the summary of a really good person, I will ask, does anybody need one who has not yet received one? You haven't gotten one yet?
You left it home.
You left it at home.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You got lots of extras.
Not lots of them, but we can make them.
Greg, I think my Do you have an extra?
Sharon. Oh, wait a minute, you were packing and moving. You can't find anything. You're lucky you got clothes. You're lucky you got clothes on today.
She got Denny here.
Yeah, and you got Denny, so that's all. That's all right.
Everything else is lost.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at least she didn't lose you.
I don't want to say it.
All right, so we are in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is going through the section where he is explaining the law. And of course, there was the traditions of the leaders by this time as to what the law said and what it meant and how you fulfilled it, all of those kinds of things. And so he is going over and explaining these things, what they really meant. And of course, what he's talking about is not outward behavior. That the real issue is not just external actions. Because that's what the law had been reduced to, was external actions. You know, if you did this, that was too far, then you were in violation of the law, but if you didn't do that, you were okay. And Jesus is talking about the heart condition, right? So what he's really talking about is character. Personal character. What's character? I've asked for a show of hands amongst the women. How many of you are married to a character? But I don't want to. Yeah, okay. I was more worried about my own wife.
Don't start anything you can't.
Yeah, I know. When we talk about personal character, what are we talking about?
Doing the right thing behind closed doors when nobody's watching. Oh, integrity. Jen says that's integrity.
Jen says that's what?
Integrity, not character.
Oh, integrity. Well, what's the relationship between integrity and character? Okay, how many of you are parents? Almost all of you. Okay, all right. So what's your goal as a parent when you're raising your kids?
Keep them alive.
Keep them alive. Well, that's touche. I will absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. Although some days you have a tendency to waffle on that one a little bit. Yeah, there are. Who was it that said to me one thing about little boys? They're all suicidal. They don't know it, but they have no sense of, Yeah, any of you ever walked into the garage and found your kids playing with a gas can? Please. So what is, okay, so goal of a parent? Well, yeah, keep them alive, get them to 18 so you can kick them out. But what's your ultimate goal as a parent?
To raise a good person.
To raise a good person.
Yeah, just teach them right and wrong and good. Law abiding.
Law abiding? Okay. Even the stupid laws?
I was going to say which one.
Yeah. To raise a good person.
Well, just, not to lie. I mean, not to steal, not to hurt someone else. Just things that we learned from Jesus. Things that we should do and not do.
Okay. Doesn't seem like that tough a question, does it?
I mean, teach him to love the Lord.
Teach them to love the Lord.
No, I mean, to worship Him and everything they do and the same.
So if you teach them to love the Lord, to know Bible verses, but they're lazy and won't get a job, have you done your job as a parent?
Not fully.
Okay.
Train them up so they don't embarrass us.
Well, you know, and we chuckle at that, but there is some wisdom in that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are times where your kids are going to embarrass you. It
Yeah.
just doesn't. But Larry, you and I both know that it's wonderful to live long enough where you can embarrass them.
And I,
And I don't care. And now my grandkids are learning. You know, my grandkids grapple with no filter there on that one. Be careful in public.
I ask them if they want to go with me to town, and they say no.
Yeah. So it's to raise a good person, but then what constitutes a good person? I mean, if they memorize Bible verses and they, you know, go to all the programs and they go to camp and they, you know, say they love Jesus, but if they're lazy, are they a good person?
No.
Are they dumb? If they're dumb about everything else, does that make them a good person? I know I'm not supposed to call anybody dumb. Edit that out for me, Michael, before you post that, right? I think that's one of the words that's I'm not supposed to use. So. Well, let's face it. Right? There are young people that you go, how can you get this age and be this dumb about just basic stuff? Okay. So anyway, back to it. What makes it, you know, you as a parent going to raise a good person. What constitutes a good person?
Their character.
Their character. Well, what is character then? Well, yeah, so I think that, but you're right. The goal of a parent is to raise human beings of a particular character. And it's not to let them discover their own character. Good Lord, you don't want that. I did not want my kids to discover who they were, because I knew who they were. I know what kind of a family I married into, and it all came from that. Yeah.
The trip home.
Yeah.
You can ride with me.
Yes. Give me a ride. I'll ride with John. He's here. I got free license today. You know, character's been defined as what you are and what you do when no one's looking. Yeah. What you are and what you do when no one's looking. And so the integrity is there. That consistency, it's there. It's just not putting it out. Jesus is talking about character. Now, how do you develop character in someone?
You live it. You show them what character looks like.
Sure. Is that enough?
No, sometimes.
Come on, let's face it. We all know good people and they did everything right. And their kids went AWOL.
Yeah, I have one of them.
Yeah, okay, we all know that. So.
Well, my son said he has a nose that fits the corner because he was in it. I don't know
Well,
if that helped him.
Well, couldn't have hurt. One of my sons was visiting a while back, and I preached a Hellfire and Damnation sermon that Sunday. And not all of my sermons are Hellfire and Brimstone, but that one wasn't. Man, I felt like I was 8. I was getting yelled at for something. I had no clue what I was getting yelled at for, but I knew I was getting yelled at for something. How do you develop character in a person? Well, wait a minute. How do you go about developing character in your life? Or is it a done deal and you are what you are?
I don't know.
Sometimes they're hardships.
Sometimes it's hardships.
Hardships that change or mold our character.
Hardships. So, does that mean we should go out and seek hardships?
Yes, find us.
Yeah, they find us. We don't have to look for them.
I know
Okay.
that fathers are an example to their sons, and their sons follow that example. I can verify that.
Follow examples. Okay, but that's
Well, Whether it's good or bad.
assumes you're assuming of finding a good example
Yeah,
to
that's right.
follow.
That's right.
Okay, what else do you do to develop character in your life? Or how many, I won't ask that question.
Discipline.
Discipline. Who said discipline? Oh, you said discipline. Discipline, discipline's kind of blunt, but what kind of or how or what do you mean by discipline?
For yourself, obviously, self-discipline, being able to let yourself know when there's something that you want to do that you can't.
Doesn't, well, but if there was something I wanted to do, but I knew it shouldn't do it, so I didn't do it, wouldn't that assume then that the character was already there in place? What generated the character in the first place?
Exercising it.
Going out and doing that before and go, well, that didn't work so well for me. So I had a T-shirt for years. It said it seemed like a good idea at the time. I would say, go put your T-shirt on. What develops character in a person?
Learning or teaching?
Yeah, teaching. Teaching is good.
Difficulties.
Well, that's hardships.
No, okay, hardship.
Practice and repetition of good, whatever.
Gotta use words I know how to spell, Danny. Is that right?
R-E-P.
There's another key in there.
It's close.
Practice. Practice. We're practicing, what are we practicing?
Good things.
Good conduct.
Being responsible.
Being, hang on to that word. I did not pay her considerably today, but hang on to that word. Bring that up in a little bit. Okay?
Maybe have like accountability to somebody, like sometimes when you do something
That's
wrong,
good, that's good.
have somebody that like every week you just kind of say, hey, I kind of did this, or talk about it, and then that'll make you think more and somebody else can give you some input.
All right? Being accountable to somebody, right? That's good. How else do you develop character?
I think one thing that several of those could be rolled up into is imitation. You know, if you think about raising your children,
Right.
you can look at someone and say, I want to have that type of character for my child, so you imitate that person. And then you also make your children imitate you. You know, if you're teaching someone a job or coaching them, you make them follow the way you do it before they learn their own way, just as like a base, a foundation of how to follow someone and learn the correct way.
Yeah. I don't think you have to, though, make your kids imitate you. They will imitate you. Is what
Sometimes you have to.
I had one of those aha moments. So if you walk into my office at home on any given day, you're probably going to see three piles of three things. There's books, all sorts of books. There's guns, and there's broken tractor parts. Okay, or whatever, machinery parts laying there that I gotta order or fix or whatever. So, yeah, so anyway, the boys were little, I walked into their room one day, what did I see? Books strewed all over, toy guns, and toy cars, tractors, most of which weren't parts. I'm like, I wonder where they got this. So, they'll imitate you no matter what, so that'll come. Somebody else said something. Mrs. Anderson.
Doesn't everything develop character? I mean, if it's the Monday everything, you know, you have to keep not being too bored, and then you have the occasional horrific things and the occasional wonderful things, and all of those things develop your character.
All of those things develop character.
Daily life.
Just the practice, the routine.
Well, it's not even practice, it's just getting through life. I mean, how do you handle your...
It's our motto, we slog along. You know, you just handle the stuff every day that comes.
You know, do you seize the day? Do you just let it go by? Do you watch TV all day? I mean, all of that is developing your character.
Well, is how you handle that developing your character or reflecting your character?
All of the above. it can, you know, some people.
Primarily reflecting or primarily developing?
For myself, in between.
You understand the meaning of the word primarily?
I think your attitude develops character. I mean,
Or is your attitude a reflection of your character?
oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Character is a neutral word, is it not? I mean, are you assuming only good character? Because there's also bad character.
Absolutely, there can be bad character, yeah.
So it's just descriptive.
I don't want to go off on a tirade here.
Do it.
Seth, when?
How come nobody said sports?
We know better.
Boys and hockey, yeah.
You know what I constantly hear for the justification of sports? It builds character, right? Baloney. It demonstrates character. I don't see it building character. Anyway, I won't. I just thought it was interesting nobody said it. But you may be right. They just.
But it seems like you have to have a set of rules basing, because practicing, I used to be a tennis coach.
Okay.
Practicing
Be
does not
careful
make
now,
you.
because that kind of sets me off. But anyway,
Okay.
all right.
You don't like tennis?
Practicing does not make you a better tennis player.
Okay.
Perfect practicing makes you a better tennis player. So if you're practicing with no set of, this ground
Right.
rules to start from,
Right.
you have to have some base.
There's got to be some standard that you're comparing, that you're achieving for. Okay, so when do we stop developing character in our lives?
Death.
Yeah, death, exactly. So how many of you have as a goal, have a particular role model in mind? You have as a goal daily disciplines and things that you are committed to going through in repetition, examples you're following, so you can develop into the person you want to be.
That's the question. That's the question.
Yes.
That's the question. That's the question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, what Jesus is describing here in the Sermon on the Mount, especially in the section in the 5th chapter of Matthew, verses 21 to 48, what he is stressing here is, it is not about external behavior. It is about character, the type of character that you need to develop if you're going to be a genuinely good person. And of course, that was the idea of the law. This is what you had to do to be a good person. But then, of course, it had been reduced to, as long as you don't do any of this and you make sure you do all of this, you'll be okay, without any regard to what the interior life of the person was like. So now we're in verse 33. No, we are not in verse 33. What am I looking at here? Oh, because I'm in chapter 6. All right, we are in verse 33, chapter 5. Again, you've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. No one shall make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair black or white. But let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no, and anything beyond these is of the evil one. So, why do we take oaths? Okay, where are some places that you take an oath? Not in marriage, that's a vow, that's different. Where do you take an oath? Court.
The military.
The military, when you're sworn into the military, you take an oath.
The doctor.
Denny, where else have you taken an oath in your life?
Offices of.
Political offices, right? Yep. You swore to defend the Constitution of the United States and defend Silver Creek from all enemies, foreign and domestic. However the oath goes. Okay, so in court, when you join the military, when you take political office, there's an oath of office that you have to take. So why do we take oaths in those situations? Why do you take an oath in court? And what is the oath that you take?
To tell the truth.
It's a promise.
To tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. That's right. So then in the military, why do you take an oath?
It's a dedicated commitment.
It's a dedicated commitment to a particular course of action.
Yep.
There you go. You promise to do these things. Even if it costs you your life, you're going to do these things. Right. Political oaths or oaths for political office, the idea is, okay, same thing. You are going to follow this set of rules, known as the Constitution, both of the United States and the state of Minnesota, if you're in the state of Minnesota. So you are committing yourself to a particular course of action is what you're doing. Well, what do you have to do that? Wouldn't you do it anyway?
It's that accountability piece.
It sets up an accountability, okay? So in everyday conversation with people, do you ever take oaths?
Flippantly, I suppose. Well, I try not to, but I mean, it's like,
Yeah, but what do we do?
I swear, I swear.
Swear on a stack of
Yeah, I
Bibles.
swear, yeah.
I swear on my dear sainted departed mother's
Yeah,
grave,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever. So what are you trying to do when you do that? Kind of use that, engage in that kind of language.
Convince somebody of something.
You are trying to convince somebody that what you're saying is true. And so we usually do it in effort to get somebody's attention and to convince them that something is the case. And why do you care if they are convinced it is the case or not? Because usually you want them to do something. So oaths, oftentimes, while there's a legitimate place and use for them, a lot of times oaths, especially in everyday language, discourse, it winds up being a means by which you manipulate other people. Especially if what you're saying is indeed not true. And of course, in the Jewish law, they had all of these standards. Well, if you say this, then you're bound to it. But if you can hedge it a little bit, and if you say it this way, then you're not bound to it. You know, it's kind of like, I swear that what I'm saying is true. Oh, but I had my fingers crossed. You know, so there, I'm let off from it. And so it is about, though, what the Lord is talking about here when he says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Tell the truth. Develop a reputation and be known as a person of the truth. What is truth?
Reality.
Reality.
You should all be able to answer this in unison. It's reality from God's perspective. What you are saying is not slanted, it's not twisted, but you tell the truth. Be a person of the truth. So, why is it important that we tell the truth? I mean, would you rather know an uncomfortable truth or a comfortable lie? Well, it depends is the answer. You know, we had, in the last 20 years in our country, we've had two great examples of something that demonstrates why it is so important to tell the truth. Now, if you go to, if you went to business, any of the major universities in the United States, let's say prior to, I don't know, the mid-90s or about 2000, if you were going to school prior to that, you were taught that morals and values were a subjective thing for which there was no objective standard, and it was basically a matter of your opinion versus another person's opinion. And so then after teaching a generation of that to people that were in leadership and influential places in the United States, they went out and acted like that. And for some reason, we were all surprised then at what the results were. So here's the interesting thing. If you look at the stock market in the United States since 2020, it's a fascinating graph. Because the stock market at the turn of the millennium was relatively high, higher than it had ever been before. And then 2001. What happened in 2001? 9/11. 9/11 comes, September 11th, 2001. The trade towers in New York are hit, and the whole financial district is destroyed. I don't know how many of you remember this, but literally, so that was a Tuesday, I believe. 9/11 was on a Tuesday, and the towers came down, and literally the entire infrastructure around Wall Street was destroyed. The computers, the network, I mean everything. And so there was no stock trading then for the rest of the week because it couldn't be done. There was no infrastructure, it just couldn't be done. So the stock market is closed. It's gonna open Monday, the following Monday morning. So everybody's working like crazy to string something together so the stock market can open Monday morning following 9/11. Which it did. And then the question was, what was gonna happen in the financial sector? I mean, what was gonna happen to the stock market? Because this is a pretty major impact. Well, what happened is the stock market opens on Monday morning, and within an hour or something, it fell by 30%. It dropped. So it's a negative 30%. And that triggered a recession in the United States that lasted about a year, about 14 months or something like that. We were technically in an economic recession. And then we came out of the recession, but it took the stock market 3 years to recover, to back to where it was on September 10th, 2001, all right? So it's a 30% drop, took 3 years to recover. Great. 2008, we had the banking crisis and the insurance crisis and the whole derivative thing, the housing, talk about the housing bubble, but it wasn't really in real estate, although it affected real estate. But these financial derivatives had been packaged and bundled and sold and all of these things, and then the bubble burst. Boom. So in 2008, then the stock market took a drop again, but this time it fell 60%. From its peak in 2008, from where it was just before the crisis, to where it bottomed out, it was a 60% drop in value. And then that triggered a recession that lasted longer than the recession out of 2001, and it took almost 8 years for the stock market to come back to where it had been prior to the crash here. All right? So 2001, you got a 30% drop, takes 3 years to recover. 2008, we have a 60% drop and 8 years to recover. Now, analysts have looked at this and said, so what was the difference between these two?
5.
What? What was it?
5 years. 5 years.
This came because of an attack from without, right? People flew planes into buildings. This was an external attack by an enemy, is what happened. And so this was the result. But this
was built on lies.
This was built on lies. This is internal lies. There, I got it. Internal lies. So what does the market fear the most?
Truth.
It fears not knowing the truth.
Right.
It fears not knowing what the truth is. More than an external attack. We can recover from an external attack. But if what you're being given is a lie, is false information, there's a bigger fear, and once the lie is exposed, it takes longer to recover the trust. Now this is on a macro scale. This is on a macroeconomic scale. This is the consequence of lies in the financial district. This is a consequence of a bomb. in the financial district. This tells you that the financial district is most concerned about knowing what the truth is, right? And if you remember this, was at least one, maybe two of the biggest accounting firms in the United States, prestigious, well-known, well-regarded, well-respected, they went out of business because they came back and said, wait a minute, you guys audited these records and you verified them, and they turned out to be lies. And big firm went out of business. So here is just a one, macro scale, one example of what happens within the world when people don't tell the truth. That's why it is so vital to tell the truth, because it arises from the character of God. So, you ever worked with someone and you had dealings with them, whether in business or you worked with them or knew them, whatever, and everything they told you was suspect? Because it might have been, some factual elements there, but it always had a spin to it. It always had a slant to it. You ever know somebody like that? Yeah, so after a while, how do you deal with them? You either don't deal with them, or if you have to, you don't believe anything they say. Right? Because there's a lot of character flaws you can deal with, but how do you deal ultimately with a liar? You can't. And so Jesus is talking about here is saying, look, don't use oaths, don't spin, don't put a slant on stuff. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. So that when you say something, everybody around you can trust it. That is about character. That's not just taken, well, wait a minute, go to the exact words that I said and you see it's okay. No, that's not what I said. No, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Yeah, there it is. And it has to do with character. And even character gets demonstrated in our macroeconomic stuff. So there you do. It's not, this verse has been misused. This is not about taking oaths of office or being sworn in court. That's not what this is about. Here's the review question from history. You've heard me ask this question before. For which person, being sworn in as the President of the United States, did we change the oath of office because of his religious background?
Obama.
No.
Kennedy.
Nice guess, but no. Kennedy? No. He's a good devout Catholic. He's all right. We actually, one time in our history, changed the oath of office for the presidency of the United States because of the religious background, supposedly the religious convictions of the person taking the office, not Bill Clinton.
Mitt Romney?
Nope, he never became president.
Oh, that's right.
Richard Nixon. He was raised as a Quaker, and he could not swear. So when you stand up and say, I do solemnly swear, fill the office, they changed the word. They took the word swear out because he couldn't do it. He was raised as a Quaker. He said, I do solemnly promise.
We saw how that turned out.
Yeah, we saw how that turned out. Interesting, trivial thing. Does anybody know the name Baxter Black?
Yeah. My dad says he's a good comedian.
Well, he's a cowboy poet.
Yeah. But I mean,
He's horrifically. This is highbrow literature, folks. Baxter Black. He's a cowboy poet. Have any of you ever watched any of the YouTube clips from the cowboy poetry thing in Elko, Nevada every year? It's great fun. So Baxter Black was a cowboy, and he became a large animal veterinarian, and he went to work for a big corporation, major corporation that did medicines and stuff for ranchers and large cattle operations. So he would get invited to conferences to do presentations on diseases in cows and new medicine to do it. And, you can imagine how thrilling that would be, right? I mean, you've got a whole group of ranchers, cattlemen, veterinarians, and how many times can you stand up and do a presentation on mastitis and dairy cows and keep it interesting? But he is a funny guy. So he started this, he started just turning these things kind of into comedy routines. I mean, all the information was in there. And he'd do these presentations that were hilarious. So all of a sudden he's getting all these invitations from conferences that are being held. Hey, will you come and be our speaker? Will you come? And so he would do that. And because he was really a hoot. He just knew how to do this. All right. So eventually the company he's working for gets bought out by a bigger company and they don't need him anymore. They're going to lay him off. Well, he winds up shifting over and becoming a conference speaker and public speaker. He goes out on the speaking circuit. He's in real demand. But one thing that he develops after a little bit is he will not sign a contract. He won't sign a contract. And so people will call him to come and speak and they say, great, you need to sign a contract. And he goes, won't do it. They go, why won't you sign a contract? He said, if my handshake and my word is not good enough, then what good's a contract? Simple as that. He said, all a contract is trying to do is force one of us to do something that, he said, forget it. If a handshake and my word isn't good enough, then I'm not doing it. And so he got a call from some conference. They wanted him to come and speak. And he goes, yeah, I will. But he wouldn't sign a contract. And they go, well, then we're going to go with someone else. Because we got this other guy, he'll sign a contract. So good, fine, go ahead, I don't care. So 4 or 5 days before the conference, they call him back and they go, hey, are you still available? We need somebody. And he said, well, I thought you hired this other guy. And they said, well, we did, but he can't make it. I said, well, didn't he sign the contract? And they said, well, yeah, he did. But I said, so what good did the contract do you? See? If your word's not good for anything, your signature on a contract's not going to be worth anything. And to this day, he said he's never signed a contract. He just said, if I say I'm going to be there, I will be there. And so he's got all these stories about driving through snowstorms in Wyoming because he said, I said I was going to be there, I will get there, If I got a snowshoe there, I'm going to get there, and he does. And so you can look him up. He's a hoot. Interesting to listen to. So anyway, the emphasis here is Jesus is saying, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Do not use your language to manipulate other people to get them to do what you want. So speak on that. All right, so then he goes on. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to get this done. So let your yes be yes and your no be no. He said then, now you have heard it said it was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist him who is evil, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. And whoever shall force you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Boy, that sounds kind of tough, doesn't it? Wow. So, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Where's that come from?
The law of Hammurabi.
Well, there's a version of it in the Code of Hammurabi. But when Jesus is referring to it here, the lex talionis, the eye for an eye. It's in the Old Testament. It's part of the Mosaic Law. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Now we have to understand something, is that first off, this was a limiting factor. All right? In other words, if someone personally injured you, you could not extract revenge from them beyond the level at which they had injured you. And so it becomes a principle in the law that says the punishment has to fit the crime. So whatever the offense is, it's not open-ended what the punishment is going to be. There's got to be a balance here for justice. And so we have that in our court system. So that's why we have juries. There's a civil trial. Somebody got injured. Something happened to them, defrauded or whatever. So how do we decide if the punishment fits the crime? Say that again?
Evaluate damages.
Okay, but how do you quantify damages?
Medical bills.
So if a drunk driver hits my wife in a car accident, and kills her, how do we quantify the damages to me? How do you
You should be held accountable for supporting your wife for the rest of her life.
Well, she's killed in a car accident, so she
Well,
doesn't have a life to support.
Well, I thought you meant you got killed in a car accident.
No,
No, she did, okay.
she did. How do you decide? Have you ever had to serve on a jury?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we have this, we have 8 people or 12 people. It's up to you, you decide. That's how we're gonna do it. But there is the aspect here, certainly within this, we have to understand that in the giving of the law had to do with corporate behavior and activities within a broader society. In this case, this wasn't a principle that was intended to fit interpersonal relationships directly. Because if someone hurts me, what is my reaction?
Retaliation.
Hurt them back.
Retaliation. Yeah, if I can't get justice, I'll settle for retaliation, right? And I don't get even. What do I get?
Ahead.
One better. You bet. Absolutely. And I realize I'm unique in this room in that regard. Nobody has that attitude, right? No, we all have that attitude. Because when someone injures me, I don't want to just get even, man. I want to get one better. And so the idea of justice is, no, the person injured isn't the one who is to decide what the level of punishment should be, and the person that did the injuring is not the one. Somebody else has to decide that, and it has to be weighed out. So this is not a value or principle that we are to apply, Jesus is saying, to our personal relationships. This has to do with broader society. That's why in the United States we have a separation of powers, right? The people that do the arresting are not the ones that prosecute. The prosecutor is not also the judge. We have the separation of offices. So Jesus takes this and says, no, we're misusing this, because it was actually those within the Jewish law that it said if someone injured you, you had an obligation to get revenge. Or if someone injured one of your family members, you had an obligation to do that, to make sure that some kind of revenge was extracted. And so, now this is not saying, Jesus is not at the same time saying we're supposed to be passive in the face of evil. He stands up against evil a lot. But there's a contrast within this on the difference between my personal rights and my responsibilities. Okay? So, do I have rights as an individual? Oh, come on, this is not a hard question.
Yes.
Shelley gives you a few, maybe.
Shelley, well, she gives me I can tell how long the leash is. Do I, as a citizen of the United States, have rights?
Yes.
Thank you. Boy, I was relieved. I was worried there for a minute. All right?
We're a little gun shy.
Yeah. So what's the emphasis within our culture today?
Freedom of speech.
Oh, that
Well, I do have, yeah. My rights. My rights. My rights. I've got the right to. And as soon as I say I have the right to, what am I by implication then saying?
You don't.
You have a responsibility. I got the right, you got the responsibility. It's got to be there, right? Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so our emphasis is completely on rights. How much do you hear about our responsibilities?
Not much.
Not at all.
Just when it's your rights and then my responsibility.
Yeah. When I'm here to tell you what your responsibilities are to me, then then I'll talk about responsibilities all day long.
Right.
Right. And so, while we have rights, does that mean we should always be demanding and claiming our rights. No. Jesus is clearly saying sometimes you're better off being the injured party and letting it go than demanding what your rights are. Now he's hitting on something here that is really interesting when you look at it. So if you ask most people today, what do you want out of life? What's the answer? What do you want out of life? I just want to be happy. Right? And what makes me happy?
Being left alone.
And I have the right to be left alone, which means you have the responsibility to leave me alone. Right? Right? If I have right to my property, you got the responsibility to stay off of it. Right? So when people are talking about their rights today, what it ties back to is I can't be happy unless and until everybody recognizes my rights. Okay. Now, I've said this before. This is a childish at best goal in life.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to be happy. Well, good luck with that. You're talking about a state of being that lasts 3 to 5 seconds. Because that's when happiness comes into place. What we want is meaning and purpose. What gives us meaning and purpose?
Being left alone.
No. You're wrong. What gives us meaning and purpose?
Significance, being a significant.
Responsibilities. Responsibilities give us purpose. As soon as I take on a responsibility, what do I gotta do? Get out of bed in the morning and get on with stuff. If all I'm worried about is being happy, what do I gotta do in the morning?
Stay in bed.
Stay in bed. Okay? If I take on responsibilities, now I've got purpose.
Yes.
Because I got something I gotta do. I got someplace I gotta be. I've got some stuff that has to be done and people are counting on me. And when all of that happens, I get meaning. And meaning and purpose in life is way better than happiness. Now, if I fulfill my responsibilities, and I become really good at my purpose in life, and I have meaning, what will I be? Happy. Happy. But that's where we have given up. You got to go back almost to maybe the Depression, the generation that was born in the Depression, during the Depression, to really get a culture, talking in the United States now, where responsibilities were the theme, right? So here they are. So what were you responsible for in the community you were growing up? Let's say if you could go back to 1920. Born in the 20s. So let's say 1932 Arbors. What was the emphasis culturally?
Family.
Family and
Community.
You did things to help each other, because you couldn't make it on your own. You couldn't make it by yourself. You drew it all together. And so it was the idea that we had a corporate responsibility to make sure we all got through. Now, I think the really fascinating question, because you think about this, you take a group of kids and raise them in that culture. You got a responsibility. More than just yourself. You got a broader responsibility. You help out family. You support family. Your family's having hard times. You take the family in. Well, the house isn't very big. Too bad. You figure that out. But there is the living up to responsibility. Now keep in mind, it's that generation that won the war against fascism in the world. Now the fascinating question is, would they have won that battle had they not been raised in the Depression?
Probably not.
I don't know.
It's great. Historians have debated that if we hadn't had the Depression prior to World War II, World War II would have turned out much differently. And it's a great thing that you can talk about here. So it is the idea that we should take on responsibility. If you feel a lack of meaning, a lack of purpose, in your life, what should you do? Find something to do. Take on some responsibilities. How many of you want to take on more responsibilities? All right, one brave hand up here. This guy gets the gold star for the week. I hand out one a week sometimes. You get it. Yeah, take on more responsibilities. Now, how does that sound to you, though? I mean, seriously. When I say you need more responsibility, what's your immediate reaction? Yeah, drop dead, buddy. You don't have everything I got to do as it is. And yet that becomes exactly what we should be doing. If we want purpose and meaning within it, we should be taking on responsibilities. You know, what is it that keeps people from taking on things like political office? Lies. Wait a minute, let me go on the record that not all people who hold political office are liars. I am here. What's your response when I say you need to take on more responsibility?
I'd rather poke pins in
I'd rather sit on the curb and poke pins in my eyes. I don't want responsibility because it's demanding. And yet, why are we so afraid of taking on responsibility?
You might fail.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you might fail.
And you're afraid of that. You know?
Yeah.
It's an unknown.
It's an unknown.
Selfishness.
Selfishness. Yeah. Because you know what? Some mornings I don't want to get out of bed when the alarm goes off. And I don't want to help somebody else. And I don't want to be responsible for other people. Right? What's the beauty of when that first kid finally turns 18 and you watch him go down the road? You know, all right, 2 more to go and we're out. You know. And yet, of course, that's not true. That's not what happens because then the little scoundrels come back with grandchildren and leave them and say we'll be back in 3 days.
You get what you deserve, you know.
What?
You get what you deserve.
Yeah, well, touche.
Building character in your life.
It's building character in my life. But Jesus is talking about character here. So if you look at the list, and I heard the bell, we'll have to try to wind this up. So in this section, he goes over 6 contrasts. So the old law said don't kill anybody. But he's saying, hey, you know, if somebody else is annoying you, you in turn should be willing to help them. That's how you should be viewing other people. You should not be holding people in contempt and certainly not expressing anger to them. That's the kind of person. Not just the outward action, you know, as far as seeing someone else who is attractive. You don't use other people as objects of gratification. Human beings are not here for your gratification or mine. That's not what is to happen. You know, it's easy to just talk about pornography or lust and say don't do it and go on to the next thing. But he's going, no, wait a minute. This is broader than just sexuality. You don't use people for your gratification in any sense of the word. When it comes to marriage, you know, that day comes when it does eventually, I'm told, I haven't experienced it myself, when your marriage partner, your spouse, finally really annoys you, you know, you don't kick them down the road. Instead, what you do is you seek that reconciliation because the marriage union is an image of the union we have with God. When you want someone to believe something, you just live your life in such a way that your yes is yes, what your word is good, it is dependable. You can do things on a handshake, and you say how things they are. You don't use words to manipulate other people in order to get them to do something that you want. If you're injured, you know, the idea that you can inflict the same injury on them. No, it's you don't harm them. In fact, you do what you need to help them. And then Jesus talked a little bit here at the end. There was one more about where he says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. By the way, how many of you in this room have enemies? We all do. We all do, in some sense of the word. Instead of hating them, instead of fighting them, you are to love them and bless them. You are to help those that come to you for help. Now, and by the way, what's implicit when he's talking here about lend to the one who asks, somebody wants your shirt or wants your jacket, give him your shirt, give to the one who asks, don't turn away from the one that wants to borrow from you. He has that. Why is it difficult to really genuinely help someone else that's in trouble, that's having a problem?
It cost us
What does it cost us?
our comfort.
It costs us our comfort and our time. We have to get involved in their lives. Ministry to people, most exhausting thing about it is people. Because you gotta get involved in their lives. And sometimes the ways that you gotta get involved in their lives becomes just draining and exhausting. You know, having people live in your home with you is an exhausting thing, isn't it?
Yes.
That's why you like to see your family go after 3 days. And so it's there. This is the type of person, this is the personal character that Jesus is standing up and saying, if you want to be a truly righteous person, a righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, this is what it looks like. Now, how many of you are like this? Funny, not a hand. So then it comes back to that question. How do we become this kind of person? What does it take so that at the end of our lives, when we have a service, which there will be for all of us, like we had yesterday for Don Swanson, this is the description of us. What does that take? How does that happen?
Determination.
That's the question we'll pick up next week. Let's close in prayer. Father, we praise you for your word and the fact that you are a loving Father who wants to see us be your workmanship, your craftsmanship. And Lord, I pray you would be at work in our lives, that we would desire to be the people you want us to be. We thank you for the worship service that's ahead, and we just ask it would work to your honor and glory. So we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.